All right, so good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those who don't know, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we're especially excited this week because this is our World Oceans Week. In the build up to Friday's World Oceans Day, we are doing over 50 hangouts with amazing researchers, explorers, scientists from around the globe. And so thank you so much for joining us. We have some new classes today, first time ever, and some that have done several hangouts throughout the week. Right now, we're joined by 5 classes from across North America. So before I introduce our speaker, we'll go through them and give them a chance to do a bit of a shout out. So we have Mrs. Moroziak class, grade 2s in Sherwood Park, Alberta. Hi, guys. Hi. We have Miss Cranks, grade 2s in Bowmanville, Ontario.
Wave hello.
We have Mr. Chris's grade 2s in Canton in Michigan. That was so loud. I love it. We have Miss English's grade 4s in Sweeten City, California. Hi, guys. The mic's muted, but we can feel the enthusiasm. And then Miss Fisher's grade 3s in Carsonville, Michigan. You guys have to do your own right. Hi, guys. Hi. Awesome. All right. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speaker. So we are joined live by Julie Angus in Victoria, British Columbia. She is, without sugarcoating it, one of Canada, North America, and the world's greatest explorers and adventurers amidst dozens of expeditions. One that really stands out is crossing the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat from mainland to mainland, the first woman ever to do so, which is only a small part of a bigger expedition from Moscow to Vancouver, including cycling and rowing and all sorts of things. That she's done more journeys, enough journeys to account for going around the world like 3 or 4 times just by muscle power, written multiple books, done multiple documentaries to, talk about her exploits. And so without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Julie.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Jesse. And I'm really excited to be here and to be talking to classrooms all across Canada and the US. So thank you for sharing your day with me today. So as Jesse said, I've done lots of different expeditions and adventures exploring different places around the world, and most of them are water-based. So what I want to talk about today is some of those adventures and how exploring has allowed me to better understand our oceans and our rivers and our aquatic environments. So I have a little PowerPoint presentation that I'm just going to put on the screen to show you some pictures of the different places that I've been. So I think that I'm going to be able to get this to work a-okay. Yep. Can you guys see that?
You're great.
Yes, you can. Okay, perfect. So as Jesse said, I've written quite a few books and made some documentaries, been on a number of different expeditions. And today I just want to talk a little bit about what it's like going on these adventures and exploring. And one of the things that I've really discovered is whatever you plan on doing, it never really works out like you think you're going to, like it's going to. So when we rowed across the Atlantic Ocean, we had a goal. It was going to take us 4 months and we weren't going to have any bad weather. But instead, it took us 5 months and we got hit by 2 hurricanes and we ended up in a different location than we wanted to, but we still managed it. And so one of the things I found is really important in exploring is keeping your eye on the goal. And one of the expeditions I went on was sponsored by National Geographic, and it was exploring the olive tree. Now, you're probably thinking, well, olive trees aren't really, they don't grow in the water. So how is this linked to our oceans? But one of the questions we had is, how did olive trees spread throughout Europe? And we wanted to travel on the Mediterranean Sea following the routes that people traveled thousands of years ago in their ships, because they would have carried olive trees with them and helped them grow in different places. So we actually took my son on this expedition. He was only 10 months old, and we sailed through the Mediterranean for several months looking for these big old trees. through some very beautiful places, eating the foods along the way and exploring ancient civilizations and cultures to better understand how the Mediterranean and these early seafarers helped spread the olive tree throughout Europe. Another expedition that we did, which was also in Europe, was rowing boats on rivers and canals and along the coast, all the way from the top of Scotland to Syria in the Middle East. And now those two places are pretty far apart. It's about 7,000 kilometers. And our goal was to connect our ancestral homelands, because my father was born in the Middle East in Syria, and my husband's parents both were born in Scotland. So we decided that we were going to build our own boats. And building your own boat is pretty fun because you get to decide how you want to design it. So we decided that we were going to make a rowboat. But we thought, you know, there's going to be a lot of times when we won't be able to be on the water. So we wanted a way to travel on land. So we figured out a way to tow the boats behind our bicycles. And then when we were in the water, we were able to put our bicycle inside our boat and then continue traveling on the water. And sometimes we even camped on the water. We would join our boats, kind of catamaran them together and put a platform on top, allowing us to sleep on the water. And we traveled all the way from the top of Scotland, along the coast, through rivers and canals in Scotland and England, and then across the English Channel into Europe, where we followed some major rivers, the Rhine and the Danube, all the way to the Black Sea. And then in the Black Sea, we continued all the way to Turkey and then to Syria, which is where it ended. And it's very interesting seeing these rivers and canals because in many ways, they're the original roads. This is what people used to travel on before there were roads. So thousands of years ago, it was a way for them to easily travel from community to community. And we ended the expedition in Syria, where my family had an olive farm, which is how we became interested in olive trees. And we stayed with my family there as well. And that's the book that we published on that. And the thing with our expeditions is we're always exploring in different ways. And one of the things that we're doing right now is we're creating an autonomous boat. So that's a robot boat. It's kind of like a self-driving car. And this summer, actually in about a month, we're going to send it across the Atlantic Ocean. So this is an early prototype of the boat. It's going to have solar panels on it. And our goal is to become the first autonomous boat to cross the Atlantic Ocean. And we're going to leave in July, and we think it'll probably take us about 2 months. But it's a pretty hard trip for an autonomous boat. There have been lots of other boats that have tried already. 28 different boats have tried, and none of them have made it. So we have a few ideas about how we can design our boat differently to give us a better chance at succeeding. And really, autonomous boats on the ocean are very interesting and very useful for research so that people can better understand the ocean and the climate. And our boat will have sensors on it so it can measure temperature and other climate conditions as it crosses the Atlantic Ocean. But the one expedition that I want to talk about a little bit more is, as Jesse mentioned, I rowed across the Atlantic Ocean from Portugal to Costa Rica. It was my partner and I, and we spent 5 months on the ocean. So that was a really interesting way to experience the ocean. And it was part of a bigger trip where I traveled halfway around the world by human power. So this is the rowboat that we used, and can you imagine living there for 5 months? It's a pretty small space and slowly moving your way across the Atlantic Ocean. But the trip actually for me started in Moscow, where Colin and I started cycling. And many of you might ride your bikes to school or for fun. Well, imagine riding your bike almost halfway around the world. In total, it was about 15,000 kilometers. That's a lot of bike riding. First, we had to ride from Moscow all the way to Portugal, to Lisbon, Portugal. So we traveled on big roads and little roads through towns and some beautiful places. And it was only Colin and I, and we carried all our own food and water and picked up what we needed along the way. And then we camped at the end of the day, wherever we were. And one of the nice things I like about riding my bike is really getting to watch the landscape around me change and meet people who are living in the countries that we travel through. And finally, we reached the end of the road. There was no more road in front of us, only the Atlantic Ocean. So we got our rowboat, which was sent to us in Lisbon, Portugal, and we started to get it ready. So it was a used boat. We knew it needed a lot of work, so we started fixing it up, and we transformed it into a very seaworthy boat, so it was ready to deal with anything that we would encounter on the ocean. And we packed it full of everything we need for a 5-month ocean crossing. So that's a lot of food, but also anything you need to fix the boat or a first aid kit, all of these important things, because there was no other boat traveling with us. We would be all alone in that boat for 5 months. And then we left. And that was really exciting because suddenly we're off on this big adventure, and we didn't really know what to expect when we're traveling across the ocean. We didn't know, what the weather would be like, what animals we would see. We could guess, we could make predictions and forecasts, but until we were out doing it, we wouldn't know what to expect. And the first couple weeks were really hard. I don't know if any of you have been on a small boat on the water for a little while and it's kind of wavy and you feel seasick. Well, we felt pretty seasick for those first few days. And we had equipment break on us too. One was our desalinator, which makes fresh water for us. It converts salt water to fresh water. And another one was our GPS, which tells us which way to go. And this was pretty troubling because they're both really important pieces of equipment. And Colin and I couldn't decide which was more important to fix. So we would work on one thing. I would work on the desalinator and he worked on the GPS. But then the weather changed and we were both inside the cabin because we weren't able to row. And while we were busy working on our problems, we realized there was a much bigger problem bearing straight down on us.
That was like a foot away from us. I opened the door and I looked inside and I saw that all I saw was the side of the freighter. There wasn't a foot.
So we were almost hit by this freighter. And it wasn't that we weren't keeping watch, looking outside our hatch, but it was that the waves were so big that we really couldn't see very far. So we learned a very important lesson that day. And that was one of the biggest mistakes we ever made. From that point on, we kept much closer watch when we were in the cabin when we couldn't row. But things got a little bit better after that. The weather improved, but then the waves started to get bigger and we found out that there was a hurricane coming towards us. And now this is a really frightening thing because here we are in a little rowboat with a storm that has the power to decimate a city coming towards us. And we can't row out of the way. We're stuck dealing with this storm. So we noticed from that point on, things started to change. There was different cloud formations and we stopped seeing boats. And we realized that we have to prepare to get hit by a hurricane. And the waves continued to grow. And pretty soon they were too big to row in. They would wash us off of our rowing seat. And we had to go inside our cabin. And our cabin's very small. It's like a small table. So imagine crawling underneath a small table with your best friend and not getting out for, well, about 3 days. That's how long we were inside the cabin for. And we're just being shaken around. And finally, after 3 days, we were able to go outside again and start rowing. And we learned a lot of things by going through that hurricane. And we even learned a few lessons to what to do if we got hit by another hurricane, which is exactly what happened. So I just want to share one of those lessons with you in a video clip.
Well, we've got another hurricane coming towards us, and we've done everything we possibly can to prepare the boat. We've battened down the hatches, we've secured down loose gear, tied everything, screwed down the hatches inside the cabin, and now it's just a waiting game. And the biggest danger if the boat does roll is getting slammed into the walls, and in order to and getting broken bones or even head injuries. To protect our heads, we've actually fastened helmets, which we've made from pantyhose, and we've stuffed the interior with clothing. And so if we do end up banging our heads against the wall, it will actually protect us somewhat, much better than not having anything at all.
But one of the things that we liked the most about rowing across the Atlantic, it wasn't the scary things like getting hit by a hurricane or having equipment break, but it was the animals that we saw. And we really didn't know what we would see out there. But as it turned out, we saw quite a bit. We saw pods of dolphins, spinner dolphins that would just come visit our boat and leave pretty quick. We saw a few sharks, including a great white shark that circled our boat a couple times and then passed right underneath us. We saw whales, lots of whales. Often they would be near the surface of the water and then spout and submerge when they noticed us coming. And turtles, we saw quite a few turtles. Most of them were pretty shy, but we saw one that was about the size of a small table. It was eating the barnacles that were growing off the bottom of our boat. So it was there for a while, and we could actually stroke its flippers and take some pictures of it. And we saw flying fish. These are pretty cool. They don't actually fly, but they glide through the water. So you'll see a whole school of these fish come out of the water and glide through the air for 100 feet or more. And the reason that they're leaving the water is they're being chased by big fish. But as soon as they go in the air, they get chased by big birds, like this magnificent frigate bird. But our favorite fish of all were these little triggerfish, because they followed our boat for hundreds, even thousands of kilometers. And we would feed them scraps from our food, and we named them. We had this little trio that followed us for a long time, and we named them Ned, Ted, and Fred. And we could recognize them by little marks in their fins. So in total, Colin and I spent 5 months rowing across the Atlantic Ocean. We did a little bit of fishing, catching dorado, also known as mahi-mahi. Of course, we don't have a fridge, so what we don't eat if the fish is too big, we have to dry. And finally, after 5 months, we celebrated my birthday, Colin's birthday, Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day. Finally, we were approaching land. And I'm just going to show you a video clip of us arriving in Costa Rica.
Well, this is it. Our final day on the ocean after rowing 10,000 kilometers in 146 days. And it has been hard, right to the end. The last few days, we could not even stop. We had such strong currents. And every time we stopped rowing, we'd start going backwards. And we're having to row 18 hours each a day, which is a lot of rowing, 24 hours in total, sometimes doubled up. We encountered one last final storm with winds of 55 knots and big 25-foot, 30-foot breaking waves. And we just cannot wait to be at land again. Well, I can't believe it. After 10,000 kilometers We're almost there. We've got a little group of well-wishers. And it's a dismal, rainy morning. And we're finally pulling into Costa Rica.
So we reached land, but it wasn't quite the end of the expedition for us. We still had to ride our bikes 7,000 kilometers to get back home to Vancouver, which is where the expedition first started for Colin, who rode his bike and traveled all the way around the world by human power. And I'm just going to show you a video clip of us arriving in Vancouver at the end of the expedition.
It feels incredible. The last leg, we're about 8 kilometers away from the finish line. We've got all these wonderful people that have come out and joined us for the final moment.
It feels completely amazing to have 43,000 kilometers behind us and about 5 ahead of us.
Now you have an idea of some of the places that I've traveled through for my expeditions. And I wonder if you have any questions about some of those areas that you'd like me to answer.
Absolutely, Julie. All right. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, with Julie, you guys have a question? Come on up.
Is it open there? Okay, hold on. Will I have a question?
How did you go to the washroom?
That's a good question. I think you mean, how do we go to the washroom on the rowboat? Well, we don't have a bathroom there, so there's 2 ways. You can just go over the side into the water, or you can go in a bucket and throw it over the side into the water.
I'm sure that's a very common question.
It's a very common question, yes.
We got it out of the way now. Let's go with Frank.
Question, Lily. Why did they travel on a boat?
Yeah. Hi, Miss Grace Class. You guys go right ahead.
Are you talking to us?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Lily. Nice and loud. Why did they travel on the boat?
Why?
Why did we travel? Why did we want to cross the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat? It's a good question. It's not something you think about doing every day. Well, we wanted to do it because it was a big adventure. It was very challenging. It would push our boundaries, make us learn a lot of new things. And it was an amazing way to explore the ocean, because when you spend 5 months on an ocean, you're there 24 hours a day, always observing it. You really get to see some pretty special things, including some of the animals that I talked about, but just better understanding the ocean environment too.
Excellent. All right, let's go to Mr. Chris's class. You guys have a question? Come on up.
There's not a lot of scenery on the ocean. Did you ever get bored? Did you have music?
Yeah, that is a very good comment. No, you're not really watching a lot of things out there. It's pretty much blue sky and blue ocean most of the time, unless it's stormy, and then it all turns gray. We we did get bored, absolutely. Monotony and boredom was a big problem because you're just rowing every day. You're rowing for like 12 hours. That's pretty boring. We did actually have music. We had a speaker that we could listen to music or listen to audiobooks, and that was something that was really entertaining. And we also had a satellite telephone. So even though we're in the middle of the ocean, we can still communicate with people at home.
Excellent. All right, so for the next 3 classes, unfortunately, you guys all have to demute your own microphones. So we'll start with Ms. Gutowski's class, because I know you have someone who's already ready. Yep, you're good to go.
What did your meal consist of for the cheers?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah.
What did your meals consist of for the cheers?
Oh, yeah. What did our meals consist of? That is a really good question, because what you eat is incredibly important. You need to be able to consume enough calories because you're exercising so much that you actually need to eat a lot more than you would normally eat. But at the same time, you have to have food that is really easy to prepare because we don't have a kitchen there. We just have a little stove. It's called a single burner alcohol stove, so we can cook things. And we don't have much room to store things, so everything has to be really compact. So the best kind of meals are actually freeze-dried meals. So these are meals that come in a little package. You just add water and you heat it up and you can eat it. And that's what we wanted to use. And we had a company sponsor us with those meals and send it to Portugal. But unfortunately, because of customs, we weren't able to get them out in time. So what we ended up doing is just going to the supermarket and buying things that you could find in your supermarket at home. And we had to make sure it was things that could last and be easy to prepare. So we bought a lot of things like dehydrated potatoes, rice, dried beans, some preserved things in cans and things like that. So it was a little bit harder planning our meals than we expected.
All right, let's go to Miss Fisher's class. Just come on up to the front, mute the mic, and then whoever has a question. Looks like lots of people have a question. Yeah.
How did you stay clean?
How did we stay clean? Well, we actually went swimming quite a bit. So whenever the weather would allow and that it wasn't too stormy, one of us would go swimming. We'd go one at a time because we were always a little nervous about sharks, even though we didn't see very many sharks. Just when you're swimming in the ocean and you know you have kilometers of ocean beneath you and there's so many big things in there, you're always a little bit nervous. So one person would stay on the boat and make sure that there were no other animals in the water with us, and then we would go swimming. So that was pretty much the main way we kept clean.
I think they're going to go to another class, but they might come back around to us.
Yeah, we are going to come back around. So for every class, we're going to do multiple questions. Miss English's class, I know you guys are having a little trouble with the video right now. If you can hear me while we're waiting, there's a little blue square top left of your screen. You can always type a question in there. So if it's not working for whatever reason, type it in there and I'll pass it along. But for now, we'll go back to Mrs. Moroziak's class. And you guys have a second question, go right ahead. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Try again. How did you feel when
Like shark or the whale? How did you feel?
Ooh.
How did we feel when we saw the shark or the whale?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting seeing wildlife out there, especially big animals like sharks or whales, because in some cases they're bigger than our boat. So we feel very humble because these are these magnificent big creatures in the ocean. Sometimes we felt a little nervous because they are bigger than us, but in reality, we knew that the whales were always very careful and they never nudged our boat or anything. And we just felt very lucky to see them in their own environment.
Excellent. Really quick, we got Miss English's class back. So I don't know if you heard me a minute ago. You can type in a question using the blue chat bar, but if it's working right now, you can demute your mic at the top and we can and disappeared again. Okay, we'll come back. Let's go to Miss Crank's class again.
Okay.
I'd say Miss Crank.
Yeah, hold on.
You're good, yeah.
Oh, I'm good. Okay.
Anybody have a
Go ahead.
question?
Yeah.
How does your boat not break when there's two big waves?
That's a good question. How did the boat not break when it was in big waves? Well, the boat is actually designed to be in an ocean, so it's very seaworthy. It's very well built. It won't break from a wave hitting it, but it could break from a hard object hitting it because it's built out of marine plywood covered with fiberglass and epoxy. But it's made to handle big waves. So even in the biggest storms, when we're in a hurricane and these waves are breaking on top of our boat, the water would flow off of our boat. And sometimes our boat would go on its side and it would come very close to capsizing, but it never capsized. And even if it had, it's self-righting so that it would turn right side up again if it capsized.
Excellent. That was a question I was going to ask, so
yeah,
you do it. Let's go to Mr. Chris's class.
Oh, your turn.
Would you try to cross another ocean?
Good question. I think probably one ocean is enough just because there's so many amazing places to explore, and each of our expeditions is always a little bit different. So this expedition that we're going to do this summer is crossing an ocean, but we won't be in the boat. This time we're sending an unmanned robotic boat. And by doing that, we can gather a lot of interesting data about the environment, and it helps us study the environment better, the ocean environment.
Cool. All right, let's go back to Ms. Gutowski's class. Again, just come on up, mute things, and we'll be good to go.
Okay.
There you go. You're good.
What year did this? Did you start, and how long did the trip?
It was 2 years.
Excellent. Did you catch that, Julie?
No, could you repeat that?
Yeah, it was what year did you start, and how long did the journey take?
Yes. Okay. So for the row across the Atlantic Ocean, that took 5 months. And we started, I think it was in like September. And that was one of our first trips. So that was September 2005, I want to say. And then we ended in the new year in 2006. And that whole trip going from Moscow to Vancouver took about a year in total with the cycling legs.
Awesome. All right, Miss Fisher's class, I can now demute you. Don't ask why. So if you guys want to come up and ask a second question.
Oh, there's a person right there.
Did you guys have heat?
Do we have heat?
Yeah.
No. In fact, we probably would have liked air conditioning a lot of the time. So when we were on the rowboat, it's pretty warm. We're traveling in subtropical waters. So we didn't, we just wore, swimsuits or light t-shirts, and it never really got too cold.
Okay. Miss English's class, it seems that you've got the computer working, so you're all set. So just if you take your, oh, and it disappeared again. Yes, you're back. Okay. Yep, you're good. You should be good to ask a question.
Ask your question.
Yeah.
So, did you guys get a prize once you crossed the ocean?
No, because it wasn't a contest or a competition, but we did get to share our adventure with lots of classrooms while we were doing the expedition, which was really fun. So we had students cheering us on throughout the trip and afterwards. Once we finished the expedition, we traveled across Canada on a film and a book tour, and we got to meet lots of people and talk about our travels, and we got to meet lots of students, classes like you guys, who followed along the expedition and meet them.
Excellent. Oh, it disappeared again. So Miss English's class, if you guys have a second question, might as well ask it now if you want to. But you can come back. Julie, do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So Miss English's class, you guys go first. Yep, go
How
ahead.
did you guys cook your food?
How did we go to the bathroom?
Oh,
Yeah.
is that bathroom or cook your food? What did you ask?
How did you guys cook your food?
Oh, cook our food. Yeah. So we had just a small stove. It's a single burner alcohol stove. So it was like a pot with a sponge in it. We would put our alcohol in there, which is our fuel source, and then just light it, and it just created one flame. And we just cook everything in one pot. So it was one pot meals.
Awesome. All right, and our last round of 5 questions. Rose got class. Yep. Oh.
You have medicine on your trip in case you got sick.
Very good question. We did. We had a first aid kit, which had lots of different things in it, including medicine, things like antibiotics, things to stitch ourselves up if we got a cut. So that was very important because if we got hurt out there, we had to be able to help ourselves because there was nobody there that could help us. So good question.
Yeah. All right, Miss Crank's class.
Okay, come on, Gracie.
Did you guys see any garbage in the ocean along the way?
Very good question. Yeah, you hear so much about plastic pollution in the ocean, and that's very true. And where we saw a lot of pollution was near the Caribbean islands. And what happens is when ocean currents come together and they push garbage from many, many miles and miles away. And so we saw this long line of garbage. It stretched for kilometers, and it was all different kinds of plastic debris. But outside of that, we didn't see that much. We would see occasionally a few things, something that fell off a big container ship. Sometimes it was like an actual container, a cargo container, a big spool that had held cable.
Just want to follow up really quickly to say that a lot of classes and a lot of our hangouts have talked about plastic pollution. So right now, National Geographic's issue is all about plastic pollution and has this really great list of things that any classroom, anybody can do that are easy, painless to prevent plastic from ending up in the ocean. So do check that out if you're interested. All right, let's go to Mr. Chris's class. You guys have a question? Third one.
What would you like to have on the boat for next time?
Oh, what would I like to have on the boat for next time? That's a really good question. You know, I think I would have liked some more tasty foods, things like more chocolate, more dried fruit, that sort of thing. Our food selection was pretty limited, and the meals weren't the tastiest. The other thing I would have really liked is to have more of a ocean identification guide so I could better classify the different fish and animals that we saw when we were out there.
Okay, so if you change your mind and do another ocean with you guys in the boat, you'll know what to take.
Exactly, yes.
All right, so let's go to Miss Gutowski's class. You guys have a final question for your class. Come on up. Or maybe it's frozen. I don't know. Well, we can come back in a minute. We'll start with Miss... Oh!
All right, we've got a question.
Go ahead, you're good.
How do you change?
How did you
change your clothes?
So we had a cabin, so we could go inside our cabin and change our clothes. Yep, that was it. And there's only the two of us, so nobody else is going to see us out there. Sometimes we would see boats in the distance, but they're so far away that they couldn't see us. The only time we ever had another boat that came up to us that we were able to talk to was a sailboat that we saw just a few days before Christmas. And that was, we could see them coming from quite a ways away, and we made contact by radio. And so we asked them to come over so we could say hi. And it was great because they gave us all kinds of treats like chocolate and, you know, potato chips and magazines and things that we hadn't had.
Merry Christmas.
Yes.
All right, so we'll wrap it up with one last question from Miss Fisher's class. You guys
There's a person right there. How did you find land?
A good question. Yeah. Because you can't see land out there, you know, when you're in the middle of the ocean. So we navigated using something called GPS, Global Positioning System, and that uses the satellites, and it tells us exactly where we are and where we need to go. And a lot of smartphones, an iPhone will have that, and that's how people often navigate when they drive a car as well. But when you're on the ocean, it's very, very important because you can't see where you're going.
Marvelous, guys. Well, that was a whole bunch of great questions. So, Julie, what we do at the end of every hangout is I'm going to demute everyone's microphone. So, Mrs. Morosiak's class, Mr. Crank's class, Mr. Chris, Ms. Fisher, can everyone join me in saying a big thank you to Julie for joining us today? So, thank you, Julie. Awesome, guys. For all the classes that joined us, thanks so much for being a part of our Oceans Week. We've got another full day tomorrow with tons of hangouts, so please check us out for that. But first, Julie, that was marvelous. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It was really fun meeting you all and enjoy learning about oceans.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we go, like one last message?
I think oceans are just an incredible environment, and learning about them and how we can protect them is very, very important.
All right. Well,